The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly a mile in every direction. Its ceiling disappeared into a soft blue glow that mimicked the sky of the Domari homeworld. 47 species had gathered here for 12,000 years to discuss trade, war, peace, and the future of known space. The walls were carved with the names of every species that had ever held a seat, and somewhere near the bottom, added only 3 centuries ago, was the name of humanity. Ambassador Linda Cole stood at the entrance of the chamber and took a slow breath. She had walked through these doors hundreds of times over the past 15 years. She had smiled at delegates who mocked her behind her back. She had listened patiently while the Volanthi called human art primitive, and the Kreth described human music as the sound of dying animals. She had sat quietly while the Damari refused to acknowledge her presence in meetings, speaking past her as if she were furniture. Today would be the last time. She walked through these doors. Her aide Daniel Perry walked beside her. He was young, barely 30 years old, with the kind of hopeful energy that Linda remembered having when she first arrived on the station. That hope had faded over the years, worn down by 1,000 small cruelties and 10,000 casual dismissals. "Are you ready?" Daniel asked quietly. Linda nodded. "I have been ready for a long time." The council was already in session when they entered. High Counselor Vereth of the Damari sat at the center of the raised platform. His massive form draped in ceremonial robes that cost more than most human families earned in a decade. His species resembled what humans might call a giant crab. With a hard shell, the color of copper, and 6 manipulator appendages that moved with unsettling grace. He did not look at Linda as she approached the speaking platform. "The council recognizes the human delegation," announced the protocol officer. A Nexari, with shimmering blue skin and 3 eyes that blinked in sequence. "Ambassador Cole, you may speak." Linda walked to the platform with measured steps. Around her, dozens of alien faces watched with expressions ranging from boredom to mild curiosity. The Volanthi delegate was reviewing something on his personal screen. The Kreth representative appeared to be sleeping. Only the Nexari counselor, a female named Ilara, seemed to be paying genuine attention. "High Counselor," Linda began, her voice calm and steady. "Distinguished members of the Galactic Council, I come before you today with an announcement of great importance." Vereth finally looked at her, his multiple eyes focusing with what might have been irritation. "Proceed, Ambassador." "We have many matters to discuss today, and human concerns are rarely urgent." Linda did not react to the insult. She had stopped reacting to such things years ago. Instead, she simply removed a small data crystal from her pocket and placed it on the speaking platform. "The United Terran Federation formally withdraws from the Galactic Council," she said. "Effective immediately, all human personnel, technology, and resources will be removed from Council space. We thank you for the opportunity to serve." For a moment, nothing happened. The chamber was so quiet that Linda could hear the soft hum of the environmental systems, keeping the air comfortable for dozens of different species. Then, slowly, whispers began to spread through the assembly. "Withdraw." The Volanthi delegate looked up from his screen with surprise. "What do you mean, withdraw?" "I mean exactly what I said," Linda replied. "Humanity is leaving. Our ships will depart within 72 hours. Our personnel will follow. We will take nothing that does not belong to us, and we will honor all existing agreements until the moment of our departure. After that, we will have no further involvement with Council affairs." High Counselor Vereth made a sound that might have been laughter. His manipulator appendages clicked together in what Linda recognized as the Damari gesture of dismissal. "If the humans wish to return to their insignificant corner of the galaxy, we will not stop them," he said. "Perhaps they have finally recognized their place. We wish you well in your future endeavors, such as they may be." Linda looked at him for a long moment. She thought about all the times she had asked for help and been ignored. She remembered the human colony on Tele 7. It had been attacked by pirates while the council debated whether humans deserved military protection. 40,000 people had died while the Damari argued that protecting a human world would set a bad precedent. She thought about the human scientists who had cured the Nexari plague and received nothing but a formal note of acknowledgement. She remembered the human engineers who had rebuilt the Velanthi trade network and been paid a fraction of what any other species would have demanded. She recalled every time a human had offered help and been treated as a servant rather than a partner. She could have said all of this. She could have listed every grievance, every insult, every betrayal. But what would be the point? The council had never listened before. They would not listen now. "Thank you, High Counselor," she said simply. "We wish the council the same." She bowed with perfect diplomatic courtesy, turned, and walked toward the exit. Daniel fell into step beside her. Behind them, the whispers had grown into open conversation, but Linda did not look back. "That was it?" Daniel asked as they passed through the great doors for the final time. No speech, no list of everything they did wrong. They would not have understood, Linda said. "And honestly, Daniel, I am tired of explaining. We have been explaining for 300 years. They never wanted to listen. They only wanted us to keep working and stop complaining." They walked through the corridors of the station, past alien faces that barely registered their presence. A group of Kreth soldiers stepped aside to let them pass, not out of respect, but out of habit. Humans always moved out of the way for other species. It was simply expected. Within hours, the human ships began to undock from the station. Cargo vessels loaded with equipment and personnel, research vessels carrying decades of scientific data, transport ships filled with families who had lived on council stations for generations. One by one, they turned toward human space and engaged their drives. No one tried to stop them. No one asked them to stay. The council had more important matters to discuss. Ambassador Linda Cole stood on the observation deck of the last human ship to leave. She watched the great station grow smaller in the view screen until it was nothing but a point of light among millions of others. "Do you think they will miss us?" Daniel asked. Linda considered the question carefully. She thought about the food distribution systems that humans maintained for the Velanthi. She thought about the translation services that humans provided for a dozen species. She thought about the medical facilities, the engineering teams, the security protocols, and the 1,000 other things that humans did every day without recognition or thanks, she said quietly. But they do not know it yet. The ship turned toward home, and the great station disappeared from view. Behind them, the Galactic Council continued its session without pause. There were important matters to discuss, after all. Trade agreements, border disputes, the proper allocation of resources. Humans were barely mentioned for the rest of the day. They would be mentioned much more often in the months to come. 3 months passed since the humans left, and the Galactic Council barely noticed their absence. The Great Hall continued its sessions. Trade agreements were signed. Border disputes were settled. The Damari celebrated a new holiday, and the Kreth launched another military expedition against pirates in the Outer Rim. Life continued as it always had. Then the food stopped arriving on Velanthi. Prime Trade Minister Cylon received the first reports on a quiet morning. 3 agricultural worlds had failed to deliver their scheduled shipments. He assumed it was a simple delay, perhaps a problem with transport schedules. He sent messages to the local administrators and waited for responses. The responses never came. By the end of the week, 17 agricultural worlds had gone silent. Not destroyed, not attacked, simply silent. The automated distribution systems that managed crop rotation, harvest schedules, and transport logistics had stopped functioning. Millions of tons of food sat rotting in storage facilities while the central network refused to acknowledge any commands. Cylon stood before the council with fear in his eyes. His species was tall and thin, with pale skin that shifted colors based on emotion. Right now, his skin was a deep shade of purple that indicated extreme distress. "We require immediate technical assistance," he announced. "Our entire food distribution network has collapsed. If we cannot restore it within the next 30 days, we will face widespread famine across our core worlds." High Counselor Vareth clicked his manipulator appendages in annoyance. "How does a distribution network simply collapse? Did your engineers not maintain it properly?" "The system was designed and installed by human engineers 40 years ago," Cylon admitted. We never learned how it worked. There was no need. The humans always maintained it for us. The chamber fell quiet. Several delegates exchanged uncomfortable glances. Then contact the humans and request their assistance, Vareth said dismissively. Surely they can spare a few engineers to repair their own creation. Silen's skin shifted to an even darker shade of purple. We tried, High Counselor. The humans declined. They said that since we are no longer partners, technical support is no longer available. They suggested we consult the original documentation. And where is this documentation? It was stored on human databases. Those databases were removed when they departed. The Council's technical division was summoned to examine the problem. Teams of Kreth programmers and Damari engineers traveled to Valenthi Prime and spent weeks studying the distribution network. They found a system of extraordinary complexity, millions of interconnected processes managing everything from soil analysis to weather prediction to transport routing. The programming architecture was unlike anything they had ever seen. Human engineers had built a system so efficient that it could feed 17 worlds with minimal oversight. They had created something beautiful and intricate, and they had never asked for recognition or praise. They had simply done the work because it needed to be done. Now no one knew how to make it work. The Kreth programmers eventually admitted defeat. The Damari engineers suggested building a replacement system from scratch. But such a project would take decades and cost more than the entire Valanthi economy was worth. Emergency rationing was implemented on Valanthi Prime for the first time in 3,000 years. Citizens of a council species went hungry, but the food crisis was only the beginning. On the outer rim of council space, the Nexari collective faced a different kind of emergency. Their border colonies had always been dangerous places. Far from the safety of the core worlds and vulnerable to disease and disaster, for the past century, human medical teams had staffed the clinics and hospitals that served these. Distant settlements, Administrator Korith of the Nexari Colonial Office reviewed the latest reports with growing horror. A respiratory illness had appeared on 3 colony worlds simultaneously. It was not fatal to humans, but it was devastating to Nexari physiology. The human doctors had always known how to treat it. They had developed specialized compounds that could stop the disease within days. Those compounds had run out 2 weeks ago. Korith sent urgent requests to the Council Medical Division for assistance. The response was not encouraging. Nexari medicine had never developed treatments for this particular illness because humans had always handled it. The specialized compounds required human manufacturing techniques that no other species had bothered to learn. Can we not simply copy the formula? Korith demanded during an emergency session. The medical officer, Maltheri, with 6 arms and a face full of tentacles, spread his appendages in a gesture of helplessness. The formulas were proprietary human technology. They took the specifications with them when they left. We would need years to reverse engineer the compounds, assuming we could even acquire samples to analyze. We do not have years, Korith said quietly. We have weeks. The death toll on the border colonies began to rise. Families who had lived for generations on those distant worlds watched their loved ones suffer from a disease the humans had once cured with a simple injection. Some tried to send messages to human space, begging for help. The messages went unanswered. Meanwhile, the Council faced yet another crisis. The Maltheri delegation had begun to miss important sessions, arriving late or not at all. When pressed for an explanation, their ambassador revealed an embarrassing truth. The Maltheri language was impossibly complex. It contained 17 different tonal variations, and a single word could have hundreds of meanings depending on pitch, rhythm, and context. For thousands of years, other council species had simply refused to learn it, considering the effort not worth the trouble. Human linguists had disagreed. They had spent generations mastering the Maltheri tongue, serving as translators and interpreters for any species that needed to communicate with the secret of Maltheri. Human translators had attended every meeting, facilitated every negotiation, and bridged every gap between the Maltheri and the rest of the galaxy. Now there were no translators. The Maltheri ambassador spoke at one session, delivering what was apparently an important message about trade routes and security concerns. No one understood a word of it. The automated translation systems, also designed by humans, had been removed along with everything else. "This is absurd," High Counselor Varath declared. "Can you not simply learn their language yourselves?" The protocol officer blinked all three of his eyes in sequence. "High Counselor, the average council species requires approximately 80 years of study to achieve basic fluency in mouthery. Humans somehow managed it in 15. We do not understand how." Varath's manipulator appendages clicked with frustration. "Then the Maltheri will simply have to learn our languages instead." The Maltheri had never needed to learn other languages. Humans had always been there to translate. Why would they waste time learning something that someone else could do for them? It was a question that many species were beginning to ask themselves. Why had they never learned to maintain their own systems? Why had they never developed their own medicines? Why had they never bothered to understand the quiet, patient workers who kept their civilization running? Counselor Alara of the Nexari finally spoke the words that hung heavy in the air. "We treated them as servants," she said softly. "We treated them as lesser beings doing work beneath our dignity. And they never complained. They never demanded recognition. They simply helped us, day after day, year after year. And now they are gone." High Counselor Varath dismissed her concerns with a wave of his appendage. "We survived for 12,000 years before the humans arrived. We will adapt. We will overcome. We are the Galactic Council, and we do not depend on any single species for our survival." But as the reports continued to arrive, as the cracks continued to spread, even Varath began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. The humans had left silently. They had not shouted or demanded or threatened. They had simply walked away and taken their skills with them, and the galaxy was beginning to understand what that silence truly meant. 1 year had passed since the humans departed, and the Galactic Council was falling apart. It did not happen all at once. It happened slowly, like water dripping through cracks in a dam. First came the food shortages on Velanthi Prime. Then came the medical crisis on the Nexari border colonies. Then came the communication breakdown with the Malathri. Each problem seemed manageable on its own, but together they formed a pattern that no one wanted to acknowledge. The Council had built its civilization on a foundation it refused to see. And now that foundation was crumbling. The shipping lanes were the next to fail. For centuries, Council space had been protected by coordinated patrol routes that kept pirates and raiders away from valuable cargo ships. These patrol routes required precise timing and constant communication between different species. The Kreth provided the warships. The Domari provided the funding. The Nexari provided the communication networks, but humans had provided the coordination. Human tactical officers had spent decades developing patrol schedules that accounted for the different speeds, capabilities, and limitations of each species' ships. They had created a system where Kreth cruisers and Domari frigates worked together seamlessly, covering each other's weaknesses and maximizing their strengths. It was a masterpiece of military planning, and it kept the shipping lanes safe for over a century, without human coordinators. The system collapsed within months. The Kreth believed their ships should patrol the most dangerous sectors because they were the strongest warriors. The Domari believed their ships should patrol the most profitable sectors because they were paying most of the costs. Neither species would compromise. Neither species would accept orders from the other. The patrol schedules became a mess of overlapping routes and unprotected gaps. Pirates noticed immediately. They began attacking cargo ships with increasing boldness, knowing that help would never arrive in time. In the first 8 months after the human departure, pirate attacks increased by 400%. Trade Minister Cylon of the Velanthi watched his people's economy collapse under the weight of lost shipments and destroyed cargo vessels. The food crisis had been bad enough. Now they could not even import supplies from other worlds because the shipping lanes were too dangerous to use. "This cannot continue," he announced at a council session. "We are losing more wealth to pirates every month than we lost in the last decade combined. We must restore the patrol coordination immediately." High Counselor Varath gestured dismissively with his manipulator appendages. "Then coordinate the patrols yourself. Surely this is not beyond the capabilities of the mighty Velanthi." "We have tried," Cylon admitted. "The Kreth refuse to follow our schedules. They say we do not understand military tactics. The Damari refuse to pay for patrols that do not protect their own shipping interests. Everyone wants coordination, but no one wants to be coordinated. The humans managed it, Counselor Elara said quietly. They managed it because we allowed them to. We trusted them to be neutral, to have no agenda beyond keeping everyone safe. We trusted them because they were too weak to threaten us and too useful to ignore. The chamber fell silent at her words. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But the patrol crisis was not the worst of it. The economic systems that held the council together were beginning to fragment in ways that no one had anticipated. For over 200 years, trade between council species had been facilitated by a universal credit standard. This system allowed a Valanthi merchant to sell goods to a Kreth buyer using a common currency that both parties understood and trusted. The exchange rates were calculated automatically, the transactions were recorded securely, and disputes were resolved through established protocols. Humans had invented this system. Human financial institutions had maintained it. Human economists had adjusted it year after year to account for changing conditions across dozens of different economies. When the humans left, they took their financial experts with them. The universal credit standard continued to function for a few months. But without constant maintenance, errors began to accumulate. Exchange rates drifted out of alignment. Transaction records became corrupted. Disputes piled up with no one qualified to resolve them. Within a year, the universal credit standard had fractured into a dozen competing systems. Species that had traded freely for centuries now struggled to agree on basic exchange rates. A Valanthi merchant trying to sell grain to a Nexari buyer might spend weeks negotiating which currency to use and how much it was worth. Trade slowed to a crawl. Economies that had been interconnected for generations began to isolate themselves, hoarding resources and refusing to trust their neighbors. The prosperity that the council had enjoyed for millennia was evaporating like water in a desert. Counselor, Ilara requested a private meeting with High Counselor Vareth. They met in his personal chambers, surrounded by the trophies and decorations that marked his long and distinguished career. We must face the truth, Ilara said. We are dying. Not quickly, not dramatically, but surely. Every system that held us together is failing, and we do not know how to repair them. Vareth's compound eyes regarded her with something that might have been contempt. You speak as if we should beg the humans to return. You speak as if we should crawl to them on our manipulators and apologize for treating them as they deserve to be treated. They deserved. Ilar's 3 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of strong emotion among her people. What did they deserve, Vareth? They cured our plagues, and we gave them formal acknowledgement. They built our trade networks, and we paid them half wages. They coordinated our defenses, and we refused to grant them military protection for their own colonies. 40,000 humans died on Tele-7 while we debated whether they were worth saving. They were a young species, Vareth said coldly. They needed to prove themselves. They proved themselves every single day for 300 years. We simply refused to see it. Ilara stepped closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Do you know what the humans called us, Vareth? Among themselves, in their private conversations, they called us the ungrateful ones. They had a saying that they never spoke aloud in our presence. They said that the council would never appreciate them until they were gone. How do you know this? Because a human told me years ago, a young engineer named Samuel Grant who worked on my homeworld. He repaired our water purification systems after a disaster that killed thousands of my people. When I thanked him, he smiled and said that gratitude was enough for him. He said humans did not help others for recognition or reward. They helped because helping was the right thing to do. Lara turned away, her voice heavy with shame. I never forgot those words. I never forgot his face. And I never did anything to change how we treated his people. I was too comfortable. I assumed they would always be there, always patient, always willing to serve. She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at the High Counselor. We did not lose the humans because they were weak, Vareth. We lost them because they finally realized they deserved better. And now we must face the consequences of our arrogance. She left without another word. Vareth sat alone in his chambers, surrounded by his trophies and his pride, and wondered for the first time if he had made the greatest mistake in the history of the Galactic Council. Outside, the reports continued to arrive. More ships lost to pirates, more economies collapsing, more systems failing. The cascade had begun, and no one knew how to stop it. The vote was not even close. 43 species voted in favor of sending a diplomatic delegation to human space. Only 4 voted against, and even they seemed uncertain of their decision. High Counselor Vareth abstained, sitting in silence as the results were announced. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Galactic Council was asking another species to come back. Ambassador Korath of the Valanthi was chosen to lead the mission. He was old and experienced, with pale blue skin that had faded to almost white over his many years of service. He had negotiated treaties with hostile empires and brokered peace between warring factions. Surely he could convince a young species like humanity to see reason. His ship was called the Starward Promise, a diplomatic vessel equipped with the finest communication systems and the most comfortable quarters that Valanthia engineers could design. It carried a crew of 50, along with gifts for the human government. Rare crystals from the Damari mines, artwork from the Malthari archives, medical supplies from the Nexari colonies. The gifts had been Counselor Elara's idea. "We cannot approach them empty-handed," she had argued. "We must show them that we value their friendship." Vareth had scoffed at the suggestion. "We are not begging," he insisted. "We are simply opening discussions about renewed cooperation. The humans should be honored that we are willing to speak with them at all." But even Varath knew that the situation was desperate. The famines on Valanthi Prime had killed thousands. The plague on the Nexari border colonies had killed tens of thousands more. The economy of the entire council was collapsing under the weight of failed trade networks and pirate attacks. Something had to change, or the Galactic Council itself might not survive. The Starward Promise traveled for 3 weeks, through empty space, before reaching the border of human territory. Korath had expected to find patrol ships waiting for them, perhaps even a military escort to guide them to the human capital. Instead, they found nothing but silence. "Transmit our greeting on all standard frequencies," Korath ordered. "Let them know we have come in peace." The communications officer, a young Valanthi named Thalen, worked at his console for several minutes. "Ambassador, I am receiving a response. It appears to be coming from a border station approximately 2 light hours from our position. Put it through." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a human woman in a simple gray uniform. She appeared to be middle-aged, with short brown hair and tired eyes. Her expression was polite but distant, like someone answering a door they had not expected to open. "This is Commander Patricia Webb of Border Station 7, she said. "We have received your transmission. How may we assist you?" Korath straightened in his chair and adopted his most diplomatic tone. "Commander Webb, I am Ambassador Korath of the Valanthi, representing the Galactic Council. We have traveled a great distance to discuss matters of mutual importance with your government. We request permission to enter human space and meet with your leaders." It was a pause. Commander Webb's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. It might have been surprise. It might have been something else entirely. "Ambassador, please hold while I consult with my superiors." The view screen went dark. Korath waited, his skin shifting through shades of blue and purple as his emotions fluctuated between hope and anxiety. Around him, his crew sat in tense silence. Nearly an hour passed before the view screen activated again. Commander Webb's face reappeared, still wearing that same polite, distant expression. "Ambassador Korath, the United Terran Federation acknowledges your transmission. However, we are not accepting diplomatic delegations at this time. We wish the Council well in its future endeavors." Korath felt his heart sink. "Commander, surely you understand that we wish to discuss matters of mutual benefit. The Council recognizes that certain adjustments to our relationship may be in order. We are prepared to offer significant concessions in exchange for renewed cooperation." "What kind of concessions?" The question caught Korath off guard. He had expected negotiation, not interrogation. We are prepared to offer improved trade terms, full recognition of human territorial claims, a seat on the High Council itself, if that would be acceptable. Commander Webb nodded slowly, as if considering his words. Ambassador, with respect, humanity spent 300 years requesting those exact things. We asked for equal representation. We asked for fair trade agreements. We asked for basic recognition of our contributions to Council society. Each request was denied or ignored. Our diplomats were told to be patient. Our concerns were dismissed as the complaints of a young and ungrateful species. The Council has changed, Korath said quickly. We have recognized our errors. We wish to make amends. The Council has not changed, Ambassador. The Council has simply become desperate. Commander Webb's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath her words. When we were useful, you tolerated us. When we asked for respect, you laughed at us. When 40,000 of our people died on Tel S7, your High Counselor called it an unfortunate incident and returned to discussing trade revenues. Korath had no response to that. He remembered the Tel S7 incident. He had voted against sending military assistance himself, convinced by Vareth's argument that protecting human colonies would set a dangerous precedent. Commander, I understand your anger. I truly do. But surely the past can be forgiven. Surely we can move forward together for the benefit of all species. We have moved forward, Ambassador. We have built new colonies and new trade networks. We have developed new technologies and new alliances. We have created a civilization that does not require the approval or assistance of the Galactic Council. Commander Webb paused, and for a moment her expression softened slightly. We do not hate you, Ambassador. We simply no longer need you, and we have decided to invest our energy elsewhere. The galaxy needs your assistance, Korath said, desperation creeping into his voice. Without your help, millions will die. Economies will collapse. Wars will break out between species that have been at peace for centuries. The galaxy made it clear that it did not need or want us. We are simply respecting that decision. But we were wrong. Can you not see that we were wrong? Commander Webb was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost sad. Ambassador, I believe that you are sincere. I believe that you genuinely regret what happened. But regret is not enough. For 300 years, we gave everything we had to the Council. We gave our labor, our creativity, our patience, and our lives. And in return, we received contempt and dismissal. We were told that we were too young, too primitive, too insignificant to deserve respect. Her eyes meeting his through the view screen. Do you know what it is like to help someone every single day and receive nothing but mockery in return? Do you know what it is like to watch your people die while the galaxy debates whether you are worth saving? Do you know what it is like to be told again and again that you are less than nothing? Korath could not answer. He had never thought about such things. He had never needed to. We learned something important when we left the Council, Commander Webb continued. We learned that we did not need your approval to be valuable. We did not need your recognition to be worthy. We were always enough, Ambassador. We simply stopped waiting for you to notice. The view screen flickered, and Commander Webb's image began to fade. The United Terran Federation wishes the Galactic Council well, but we will not be returning. Goodbye, Ambassador. The screen went dark. Korath sat in silence, staring at the empty display. Around him, his crew waited for orders that did not come. The starward, Promus turned around and began the long journey back to Council space. Its cargo hold was still full of gifts that no one wanted. Its mission had failed completely, and somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, humanity continued to build a future. It did not include the Galactic Council at all. 5 years had passed since the humans left, and the Galactic Council was barely recognizable. The Great Hall that had once hosted 47 species now echoed with emptiness. 12 species had withdrawn from the Council entirely, retreating to their own territories to deal with crises they could not solve. The Malthari had not attended a session in over 2 years, isolated by a language barrier that no one could bridge. The Valanthi delegation was reduced to a handful of exhausted representatives who spent more time begging for food aid than participating in debates. High Counselor. Varath had resigned 18 months ago. The official reason was health concerns, but everyone knew the truth. His policies had led the council to ruin, and his own people had demanded his removal. The Damari economy had collapsed completely, unable to function without the trade networks that humans had maintained. Vareth now lived in quiet isolation, on a remote moon, surrounded by the trophies of a career that had ended in disgrace. The new High Counselor was an Exari named Salathe. She was younger than most council leaders, with deep blue skin and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of impossible burdens. She had risen to power not through ambition, but through necessity. Someone needed to lead. She was willing to try. Her first act as High Counselor was to call a special session of the remaining council members. The chamber was less than half full when she took her place at the central platform. Those who attended looked tired and defeated, their spirits broken by years of cascading disasters. Salath stood in silence for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but clear. "We must acknowledge a truth that shames us all," she began. "For 5 years, we have blamed the humans for our suffering. We have called them ungrateful for leaving. We have called them cruel for refusing to return. We have told ourselves that they abandoned us in our hour of need." She paused, her 3 eyes sweeping across the chamber. "But the truth is simpler and more painful. We built our civilization on a foundation we refused to recognize. The humans did not force their way into our society. We invited them in. Then we spent 3 centuries treating them as inferiors while depending on their labor, their creativity, and their patience. We took everything they offered and gave nothing in return but contempt." A murmur rippled through the assembly. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others nodded slowly, their expressions heavy with shame. When they finally decided they deserved better, we were too proud to understand what we had lost. We told ourselves that we had survived for 12,000 years before they arrived, and we would survive without them. We told ourselves that they were replaceable, that their skills were ordinary, that any species could do what they had done. Soleil's voice grew stronger, filled with conviction. We were wrong. We were profoundly, catastrophically wrong. The humans were not servants doing work beneath our dignity. They were partners carrying burdens we refused to share. They were friends offering help we refused to acknowledge. They were equals we refused to see. She lowered her head for a moment, then looked up again. "I do not know if the humans will ever return. I do not know if they should. After everything we did to them, they would be justified in never speaking to us again. But I know that we must learn from this catastrophe. We must build a society that does not require the silent suffering of others to function. We must create a council that values every species equally, not just those who are strong or wealthy or powerful."
Salath raised her hand, and a holographic display appeared above the central platform. It showed a document filled with proposals and reforms. "I am presenting a new charter for the Galactic Council. It includes equal representation for all member species, regardless of age or military strength. It includes fair compensation for all labor and services. It includes protections for vulnerable colonies and populations. And it includes a formal apology to humanity for 3 centuries of mistreatment." The chamber erupted in noise. Some delegates shouted in protest. Others applauded. A few simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they were hearing. "This will not bring the humans back," Salath continued, speaking over the commotion. "Nothing we do may ever bring them back. But perhaps someday we will have the opportunity to show them that we have changed. And when that day comes, I want us to be worthy of their consideration." The vote on the new charter took 3 days. It passed by a narrow margin, opposed primarily by the remaining Domari delegates who still clung to the old ways. But it passed, and for the first time in 12,000 years, the Galactic Council committed itself to genuine equality among all species. Far away, on a planet called New Chesapeake, a retired diplomat named Linda Cole read the news of the Council's reforms. She sat in a comfortable chair on the porch of her small house, looking out at the rolling hills and green forests of a world that humans had built entirely on their own. Daniel Perry, now a senior advisor to the Terran government, sat across from her. His hair had turned gray at the temples, and lines had appeared around his eyes, but his spirit remained as hopeful as ever. "They actually did it," he said, scrolling through the report on his datapad. "A formal apology. Equal representation. The whole package?" Linda nodded slowly. "I never thought I would see this day. Do you think they mean it?" Linda considered the question carefully. She thought about all the years she had spent in that great chamber, asking for respect and receiving only dismissal. She thought about the colleagues she had lost, the battles she had fought, the hopes she had abandoned. She thought about Tella 7 and the 40,000 people who had died because the council could not be bothered to help. "Maybe," she finally said. "Time will tell. And if they do? If they genuinely want to make amends?" Linda smiled, a tired but genuine expression that softened the lines on her face. "Then perhaps we will listen. But this time we will not be the ones doing all the giving. They will have to learn what partnership actually means." She set down her tea and looked out at the colony stretching to the horizon. Cities built without council approval. Factories running without council oversight. Schools teaching children who had never known the shame of being called inferior by aliens who depended on their parents' labor. "We built all of this ourselves," Linda said quietly. "We proved that we never needed their approval to be worthy. We proved that we could stand on our own." Daniel nodded. "So what do we do now? Do we reach out to them?" Linda shook her head slowly. "No, let them wait. Let them learn what silence feels like. Let them understand what it means to ask for help and receive nothing but empty promises." She turned back to the view, watching the sun set over a world that belonged to humanity alone. "We waited for 300 years, Daniel. They can wait a little longer." And across the galaxy, the Galactic Council waited. They sent messages that went unanswered. They made offers that were politely declined. They watched from a distance as humanity flourished without them, building colonies and alliances and technologies that the Council could only dream of. In that waiting, in that long and humbling silence, they finally began to understand what they had lost. They began to understand that respect cannot be demanded, only earned. They began to understand that partnership cannot be taken for granted, only cherished, and they began to hope that someday, perhaps many years from now, they might have the chance to prove that they had truly changed. Until then, the silence continued. And in that silence, both humanity and the Council learned the true meaning of patience.